It's been about a week and a half after NFL free agency, and I want to do a video of now players whom the Detroit Lions could target with the 29th pick. How I did this is players who's generally in that area. Some of these guys will probably be taken before and some potentially after, but I want to give it a realistic possibility of some of the players whom could be available for the Detroit Lions. And we're going to obviously go after a lot of positions that the Lions need and some positions that the Lions may not need. Why? Because we know how they work. It's best player available. But we're going to do players potentially there with the 29th pick. Players like Dallas Turner, they're not going to be there at 29. So these guys I'm not going to have on the list. Marvin Harrison, he of course is not going to be there. Malik Neighbors, Laiatu Latu, Taron Arnold, and Jared Verse, I don't believe would be available with the 29th pick. Now, we all love some of these said players. Maybe the Lions would trade up for a Jared Verse, but guess what? I just don't think he'd be available at 29. So we're going to do realistic possibilities with the 29th pick. And a lot of the positions are need. Again, edge, offensive line, especially interior, cornerback, especially after the Cam Sutton news, be looking at, and maybe a position that we may not typically generally need, like wide receiver, but it is possible. Why? Because our general manager does best player available. So that's what I'm going with here. But before we get into this list, make sure you subscribe to the channel because we're going to be live for the 2024 NFL Draft, and you don't want to miss out on draft coverage. And of course, we're dropping videos nearly every single day here, so subscribe so you don't miss out on the latest Lions news and rumors. With a player who I think the Lions could target, we're going to start with 15 all the way to 115 being the least likely, all the way down to the most likely. I'm going to go with TJ Tampa for the Detroit Lions. Now, I have him as a second-round prospect. That's why I don't have the Lions taking him at 29, but it's very possible they could, right? 6'2", from Iowa. This guy is pretty good. He's got 7 pass defense. Now, I don't have him as the number 1 rated cornerback, but what if there is a run in corner and the Lions are like, you know what, we're just going to go ahead and take the cornerback here and move forward. So I put TJ Tampa as my number 15th prospect. Now, my number 14th prospect here is going to be Graham Barton, the offensive line from Duke. Lions need help on the offensive line. And look, I know we picked up Kevin Zeitler, but we got to look for the future of this football team as well, because he's only on a 1-year deal, and Graham Glasgow is, on a 3-year deal, but he's a little bit older. So could the Lions go this? Yes. Would it be difficult? I think it's going to be difficult for him to be there at 29, but it's possible if there's a run on other positions. So it's a lesser likely as we continue to go down. So 15 is going to be the least likely, 1 being likely. But it is possible. Next player on my list for the Detroit Lions who they could target here at 29 is Troy Franklin, wide receiver from Oregon. Now, you know me, I'm not big on getting a wide receiver, but the Lions, look, we picked up a lot of needs in free agency, so maybe they'd go BPA. He's a big receiver, 6'3", 187 pounds, 81 receptions, 1,383 yards, 14 touchdowns, average 17.1. If the Lions don't bring back Reynolds and they're like, you know what, we're just going to go BPA, and if Troy Franklin is sitting there, it's possible they take the wide receiver. Again, less likely, but possible. That's why he is on my list. And a number 12 here is Adonai Mitchell, the wide receiver from Texas. Big wide receiver. Play on the outside, 6'4", 196 pounds. What he did last year was not as good as previous, but 845 yards, 11 touchdowns, average of 15.4. It's very possible he's there at 29. And again, if they wanted to get that big-time X/Y receiver, boy, he could really do it. I mean, you'd have St. Brown, Mitchell, Khalif Raymond, Jamison Williams. That would be a deadly combination of wide receivers, but there are other positions that the Lions do need. And one of the positions here for me is interior offensive line, and we've seen this player mocked to the Detroit Lions in multiple mock drafts. That's Jackson Powers Johnson. Now, I have him as a second/third round grade, but what if the Lions like him? What if he gets pushed up? It's possible. I've seen mock drafts for him in the first round. That's why I'm putting him as possible with pick 29. I would prefer other players, especially other offensive linemen, to Jackson Powers-Johnson. But he is a Dan Campbell type of guy. He's a Brad Holmes type of guy. We're talking about the 6'3", 320-pound interior offensive lineman. You could grab him at 29, and the Detroit Lions can groom him and potentially even take over a starting role if there's struggles or if there's an injury. And after this year, Zeitler is gone, and he could fit in as the ultimate starter. Question for you before we continue on here. Will the Detroit Lions trade the 29th pick? Up or down? It doesn't really matter. Let me know in the comment section why for yes and for no. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I personally think it's possible that they absolutely trade up or down. Probably more probable than staying at that pick. The 10th player on my list here is Cooper Beebe. Again, I love Cooper Beebe, and the reason he's not higher is I have a second-round grade on him. But just like Jackson Powers, there could be a run on linemen, and the Lions do have a need at that position. He's a great player. Look, if they take him at 29, I'm not going to be mad, even though I have a second-round grade on him, because I know what he can bring to the Detroit Lions. He's hell of a good run blocker pass. He's a big body, 6'4", 335. Man, he would be a monster on that offensive line. And again, if Zeitler gets injured, or if Graham Glasgow gets injured, or if Frank gets injured, right? And then you got to move Graham to center. You can move Beebe right there, and it would be a great move for the Lions if there is some injuries. We don't want injuries, but we know it can happen. And we're going to continue on with the interior offensive line with Troy Fontenot. Now, I think Troy here potentially could absolutely be gone at the Detroit Lions selection. He could be gone. He could be a player who's gone. But if he's available, that could be a BPA situation, right? That could be a situation where Lions just take the best player available, and I'm not going to cry or complain at such a move because, again, 6'4", 317 pounds. He's graded as one of the best interior offensive linemen in the draft. He's supposed to go a little bit before, so if he falls there, that would be fantastic news for the Lions offensive line. And just like the others that I talked about, you can place him in. It wouldn't be a problem. At number 8, I got Tavondre Sweat, the defensive lineman. And boy, oh boy, he's a big, gigantic, huge body at 6'4", 362 pounds. We picked up DJ Reader, so it seems a little bit unlikely, but this could be a situation where they're like, you know what, we're going to double up, and we're going to make you inability to run on the Detroit Lions at all. That is what he is, a nose tackle, folks, from Texas here. 18 solo tackles, 2 sacks, 0 forced fumbles, 0 receptions. It's all about stopping the run. So I think it's less likely. I think if they go defensive tackle, it's more of the pass rushing defensive tackle, but he is a player that we got to look out for, no doubt about it. We'll continue on here with the defensive line, more of pass rushing type here. How about Chop Robinson, 6'3", 250-pound edge rusher from the Nittany Lions. I don't like him to other pass rushers, but there's a great possibility he's available at 29, and the Lions want to get some pass rush, and they could make the jump for him. But other pass rushers, I am, compared to him, because he only had 12 solo, 4 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 0 interceptions. I think there's other pass rushers the Lions could look at, but he's absolutely on the list for the Detroit Lions. Number 6 on my list is Cooper DeJong, the cornerback out of Iowa. And look, we need help at corner, especially after the Cam Sutton thing. You're 6'1", 207 pounds. He's good in coverage. He can be a number 1. He wouldn't have to be this year, but he can be for sure. He had 26 solo tackles, 2 interceptions, 5 pass defense, 0 forced fumbles. He is an option for the Detroit Lions if they want to get a corner. Again, I'm higher on other corners, but he absolutely is an option. So question for you. Pick a cornerback if available at 29. Quinyon Mitchell, Kool-Aid McKinstry, or Cooper DeJong. Put those 3 in the comments below. One of those, I want to see who you would pick for our beloved Detroit Lions. Let's continue on here with my number 5 selection here, and that's Nate Wiggins, the cornerback from Clemson. I have him going a little bit earlier, but again, we don't know how the draft is going to go, and he would absolutely be a great pickup for our Detroit Lions to have him on this roster, and I do think he could eventually be a number 1 corner. 6 pass defense, 2 forced fumbles, 22 solo tackles. He's a little bit shorter, but he's a feisty little SOB, and you know the Lions, they will go after players who are feisty. My 4th selection here is Jerzon Newton, the defensive tackle out of Illinois. I like Newton, and I think that he could be a real solid option for the Detroit Lions. He's more the pass rushing defensive tackles here. He could probably play a little bit of edge as well, I guess, on certain downs, but 6'2", 295 pounds, 26 tackles, 7.5 sacks, 1 forced fumble. I think he would be great paired especially with DJ Reader, and you would have consistent pressure from the interior. That's something that we're lacking right now, and I would love to see if the Lions could get that for them. It would be a nice option. Now, number 3 prospect for the Detroit Lions is Darius Robertson. You've been hearing him a lot, mock drafts and everything, because this guy wants to be a Detroit Lion. He's a pass rusher, and he's a damn good one, and he should be available at that 29 spot. 29 solo tackles, 8.5 sacks, 1 forced fumble, 6'5", big edge rusher. The Lions I think this is a realistic possibility. That's why he's my number 3. The Detroit Lions realistically could take him at that spot. Number 2 on my list, specifically now after the Cam Sutton situation, Kool-Aid McKinstry. Even before the situation there, Kool-Aid is a really good corner. He probably will be there with the 29th pick, and it makes a ton of sense for him to be selected by the Detroit Lions from Alabama. The Lions love going Alabama. He's 6'1". He's a bigger cornerback, 7 pass defense, 24 solo tackles. He would be a good pickup for the Detroit Lions. My number 1 selection here, in the player who I would absolutely love the Detroit Lions to get, it's possible he be there, and that is Quinyon Mitchell, the Toledo Torpedo. Man, this guy is a stud of a corner. 6 foot, 18 pass defense, 196 pounds, 32 solo tackles, 0 forced fumbles, 1 interception. This guy is a dog, and he would fit perfect with the Detroit Lions. He is a Dan Campbell type of guy, and if he's available, best believe that is one of those things where you run up and get your player for this football team, and that's what it's all about. And I do think the Detroit Lions would absolutely take a chance on this stud, and I think the Lions very well could do something like that. So, folks, that's what it's all about here when it comes to the Detroit Lions and what I think they could possibly do. Again, make sure you subscribe, so smash that sub button, hit that notification bell. We're going to be dropping news and rumors all the time in this bad boy. With that said, folks, adios.